Now on to another shocking report. A 91-year-old Auschwitz death camp survivor discovered in Jerusalem living in completely neglected and impoverished conditions. His tiny 200-square-foot apartment covered in mold, crumbling walls, exposed wires, rotten furniture, and it was left without running water. But worst of all, this is far from an isolated incident. Here with more is founder and chair of the Leket Israel nonprofit, Joseph Gitler. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us. Now, reports from last year and going long before that suggests that of the 175,000 or so Holocaust survivors in Israel, most receive just about $100 in monthly stipends, and over half require food handouts. How many Holocaust survivors are beneath the poverty line?
So we don't have exact numbers, but we know it's tens of thousands that are struggling to make ends meet. Of course, it's a nightmare scenario for the state of Israel, an embarrassment, I would say, that these people, that any citizen, frankly, should need this kind of help and not get it. And we're, all of us, not just Leket, but so many organizations are doing their best to try to ensure additional help. But as we all know, in the poverty business, there's never enough, unfortunately, to go around to take care of all the needs.
All right, well, so again, every year, usually several times per year, there's talk of increasing budgets for subsidies for Holocaust survivors, among other populations. One such plan, which was set to go into effect on the 1st of January, raises the income supplements for pensioners to at least 70% the minimum wage. Finance Minister Avigdor Lieberman said that it would lift all senior citizens and Holocaust survivors out of poverty. Where is that money? How is it being spent?
So that money will go directly to Holocaust survivors, who will then use it to help pay their rent, basic food needs. But I'm sorry to say, and it's hard to say this, even that is not enough to really make ends meet, because as we know, prices are rising in Israel, inflation is rising, and living at 70% of the poverty line is just not enough money to go around to take care of all your needs. So even with that, the agencies like Leket Israel and our partners will still need to provide support, which we do in a whole variety of ways, to the elderly, in this case, specifically Holocaust survivors.
So, is the amount of money the problem, or is the way that it's being budgeted the issue? How much money would be needed to properly lift all Israeli Holocaust survivors out of poverty?
Oh, you're talking about a few hundred million shekels a year, and that money is not going to be forthcoming. I mean, if it hasn't happened in the last few decades, it's not going to happen now. So it's going to be a very typical situation where it's a partnership of the government together with private charities. What the government's been doing for decades is relying on private charities to make up for the difference. And thankfully, there are a lot of people who are concerned about this issue and help support this issue. In this case, this terrible story from Jerusalem, unfortunately, there are also a lot of people who fall through the cracks. Yeah. They have no families and no one to help them, and no one even knows about them because not everyone is necessarily registered. And of course, our social workers in the government are overworked and underpaid, and there are not enough of them. And so this is unfortunately not the only case that we've seen over the last few years where an elderly person in Israel was found in horrid conditions in their apartment because there was just no one looking out for them.
So, all right, so maybe you can just give us a quick rundown then of what some of the biggest challenges survivors are facing and how people from home can help.
Okay, so I think probably number one is loneliness. Okay, you have people who have no families. It's surprising to hear that there are a lot of survivors who never, unfortunately, got on with their lives for very understandable reasons, and now they're alone and lonely. So one issue is loneliness. And as part of the loneliness, when we connect with a survivor, that's when we can see what their needs are. I mean, the pictures that we're seeing now are so shocking that someone in Israel of 2022 should live like that. Any citizen, it's absolutely unacceptable. So there are lots of organizations, people go into Google, they can find lots of organizations who are working on housing for Holocaust survivors, working on food, working on direct funds that go directly to people. But a lot of these people are very elderly and they just need people coming and helping them. So for example, in our organization, one of the things that we've started to do is deliver meals directly and deliver soups directly to survivors in their homes. That brings a person who visits them, finds out a little bit more about their lives and what their other needs are. And thankfully, there's so many initiatives trying to do that. So I really would hope and pray and beg people who see this, go into Google, put in how can I help Holocaust survivors in Israel. You'll see so many great operations that will come up, and you'll definitely find a way to help, but do it quickly, because as all of us are, they're not getting any younger and they need the help immediately.
All right, Joseph Gitler, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
ILTV Plus, your news from Israel and more 24/7. Start your free trial today. Subscribe at iltv.tv and watch from any device.